Hello and welcome to the show. As usual, always have interesting people, interesting careers and interesting dynamics. I've got the Speaker of the Provincial Parliament, Sharna Fernanadez, with me. Interesting lady. We've seen a lot of things happening recently on TV, but I want to find out who's the Speaker behind the Speaker. Madam Speaker, welcome to the show.
Faizal, thank you so much for having me on the show. It is a pleasure and a privilege to be here with you. I'm quite excited about chatting to you today. I don't quite know what we're going to be talking about, but I suppose you would like to know what is behind the face that you see in the chair.
Correct, yes. And I think that's important. A lot of South Africans watching the program, or even beyond South Africa, they see people on TV and they see politicians and they see the speaker and they see the role that they play, and sometimes they don't see the role that they play. But apart from all of that, we want to discover who these people are, and that's what I want to do today with you.
Faizal, yes, I'm born and bred in Cape Town. I was born in Deep River many years ago. And then we relocated to Retreat, where I probably spent 40 years of my life living in Square. But I grew up like everyone else on the Cape Flats. I had friends from all over the place, and I always had a passion for people and for speaking. And it's quite strange, because if you asked me a year ago if I would be the Speaker of Parliament, I would have said to you I would have had no idea. But life is strange, I think, and it evolves. I was very athletic and sporty at school. I was very involved in sports, swimming, anything that could be played. I've got 4 brothers. So I suppose I was a bit of a tomboy when I was young. Everything my brothers did, I had to do better. So I grew up in a family, a very loving family, but with a lot of discipline. My father believed in what he calls discipline and character. Those were important traits that were ingrained at an early age. And I think I learned values like honesty, integrity are important. My dad always said, if you make a promise, be sure you can keep that promise. So I think a lot of what I am today, I owe to my parents, because we weren't wealthy people. In fact, I would almost describe us as being poor. But we always had a plate of food, and there was lots of love, and there was always the love, but tempered with a fair amount of don't step out of the rules of the game. And I've taken that with me into my adult life. My dad was a very strong personality. And he often said that there is no grey, it is either black or white.
Yes.
And interestingly enough, after a 30-year career in banking, I suddenly find myself being the Speaker of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. And then you realize the need for something to be black or white. It cannot, there is no room for grey, not in the world that we live in today. So a lot of what I am, I think I owe to my brothers, my mother and my father, but growing up in an environment like the Cape Flats, I think always prepares one for the big world.
Correct, yes.
Life is tough out there, and it really is a matter of rising above the circumstances to try and better yourself and become something. And I hope that sharing my story with you today will encourage some young people out there to actually see the need to rise above their situation and say, if she could do it, then I can.
Correct, yes.
Because that really is what it is all about.
And I think that's a big focus of what I'm trying to do, and that's to look at people that are successful today in whatever realm they are, and work out their path so that we can look at our youth and say, these were ordinary paths until they became extraordinary paths. Every extraordinary path was preceded by an ordinary path. No one was born a star, or no one was born the Speaker of Parliament, but they became that. And I think that that's the crux of where the vision I want to show today. You speak about your parents. Are they still around?
My mom is still alive. My dad passed on I think it was 1999. Always said he'd never make the millennium, so
just before the millennium.
just before, yeah, but we still carry him in our hearts and our home every day. So my mom lives with me. I am a single parent. I have a 27-year-old son, my only child. And obviously with the help of my parents and my brothers and extended family, he got raised in a very loving and supportive environment. And then I'm also pleased to say that I'm a grandmother. My grandson is 7 years old, and I think he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. But I now understand why God made grannies, because sometimes parents are really busy getting on with the ordinary day-to-day things, and I think as grandparents we have that extra bit of time. And yes, my program is a very busy, hectic schedule, but my grandson keeps me on my toes, and he says, Nana, when are you going to be home again? So whenever I am home, I do make time to spend with him. A quick message to the youth around success. You are not born successful.
Correct. Success
comes through hard work and effort and perseverance. And many people will wake up and they'll say, oh gosh, look how lucky she is. You're not born lucky. You have to work at making yourself lucky, in a sense that you have to be focused. You have to know what your goals and objectives are. And you really have to have a dream. You need to be able to tell yourself that someday, somewhere, I want to be something. Some people might want to be doctors or lawyers or activists or speakers, but sometimes it's good to just be a parent. To be a mother is a critical role. And I think in society today, we underestimate the role of mothers. More importantly, we underestimate the role of parents. When we look at how many children are growing up without a mother and father, or living with a grandparent, then we almost need to go back to basics and say, what are those values that drive us to want to become successful, but not at the cost of our families? Because your family is your biggest support structure. When all else fails, your family is still going to be there to see you through.
Correct.
And I can talk about family because in 2009, when the H1N1 virus struck the world and came by South Africa, I was affected by the H1N1 virus.
Oh, that's interesting. I don't think a lot of people know that.
You'll not believe it. I went to hospital believing I had an asthma attack. It was on the 11th of August, 2009. I'll never forget the day because I had my 50th birthday on the 10th of August. And I always said I want to retire at 50. So be careful what you wish for, because on the 11th of August, I went into hospital, and I think it must have been the 15th of August, my temperature was 42 point something, and the lung specialist said to me, man, let us run a couple of tests. And the next thing there, I was stuck in isolation, and nobody wanted to visit me or talk to me. I got my food stuck through the little pigeonhole, you know the story.
Yes, of course, because there was a problem, yes.
A very defining moment in my life, because then you realize how fragile life is. You know, 1 minute...
You took my favorite question away. I always ask people, what are the defining moments in your life? And I'm so happy that you're saying that that was a defining moment.
One moment you could be successful, and I was out there. I had just come back from a stint. I worked for Absa Bank, and I had come back from a 9-month stint in Bloemfontein, where I sadly had to close down a unit. And I suppose long hours, flying up and down, not resting enough, the typical, what do we call it?
Corporate
syndrome, where you got to keep working.
Correct.
And I think my system was compromised, which is why it was easy for me to, and apparently someone down the passage of the hospital was being tested, and yeah, I contracted this disease. But it left me suffering from chronic fatigue for at least 18 months, and it took
a long time.
Took me a good 3 years to recover. So all of a sudden I had this career in banking that was just cut short. The bank was very good to me in that they took care of me as an employee for almost 18 months. But at some point we needed to make the tough decision, and at that stage in my life I couldn't see me going back to a stressful environment.
So this was that transition between banking and what you do today?
Absolutely.
Okay, because that's a big jump.
Absolutely.
The bank and then getting into Parliament.
Well, I always thought that I would retire from the bank, you know, and that was, I suppose, when we grew up, one job was good enough. And you know, your mother used to say, you have to become a teacher or work at the post office or work at the bank because those jobs, they pay you really
correct,
well.
yes,
That was
that was the mindset.
That was
yes.
how it was in those days. Yet now, if you consider, many young people have 12, 15 different careers in a lifetime.
Correct.
But yeah, tragically, that brought an end to 30 years in banking. I'll never forget, I joined Barclays Bank in 1981 and I earned 400 Rand a month. And that was a hell of a lot of money back then, 400 Rand a month. I could do everything and still have money left. But out of that crisis, if you could call it that, the two things I learned. The one that is your family is always there to support you. And at that stage, my mother, my partner, and my son played a key role in my life because I couldn't even get around. I laid in bed like a sick fish. And 18 months to be incapacitated is not an easy.
It's a long time, yes.
Yeah. So I basically had to use that time to repurpose my life and say, what is it that you want to do? And when I reflected on my successful career in banking, I decided I wanted to pay it forward. I said, you know what, I don't need to earn that corporate salary any longer. I think I want to take the skills that I've acquired over time and actually invest that back into a community, plow those skills back into the community to help others.
But a lot of people sound like that, and a lot of people say that. And when they say that, it means that they decided that they're going to do something like go and work for an organization or decide to give their spare time off. So how do you make the transition from the bank to Parliament? Because that's a big jump.
Well, like I say, I became a politician by default, if you can call it that,
yes.
Because I don't think it was ever my aim to become a politician. I think first and foremost, I'm a social activist. I'm always being the voice for the voiceless. I get involved in community activities, and once I regained my health, I started working in my community for no pay. And my partner would always say to me, how can you go out there, you don't even have money for petrol? And I would say, don't worry about it, it will take care of itself. I'm just preparing myself for my real job.
Yes.
Those were the words I used. Yes. And he could never understand
so
what my real job was going to be.
It's that power of manifestation.
Yes, but in my mind, I knew that God had a purpose for my life that was bigger than. And I got involved in the community policing forum. I got involved in the neighborhood watch. I assisted the neighbors with a petition around some development they weren't happy with. And then I also worked with a German NGO as a rapporteur. And a young lady called Colin Ryan invited me to come and do the reporting for her. And I must admit that was where my senses got a bit piqued. We did a project on the national health insurance. And I thought, Albert, this is so interesting. And then I went out with her to Bonteheuwel one day and we did an IDP program. And I said, I like this. But, you know, immediately I could see this is something that would interest me. And then I just became so involved. I attended sub-council meetings. I used to go and sit at a sub-council meeting once a month to hear what's happening in our community. But I think I became a community activist in a sense that everybody knew who I was. And if people needed help or assistance, they would come and knock on my door and say, can you help us with this?
So you were speaking up for them?
And yes, well, I live in Heathfield in Cape Town, but I mean, many people knew me because of my banking career. I'd worked in most of the branches across the Western Cape. I'd worked for FNB for 22 years. I had a short stint at Standard Bank, and then I went to ABSA for close on to, I think it was 7 years. So there was a vast network of people out there who I knew, but I think I also underestimated my circle of influence, because you never know who you touch when you wake up in the morning. And you know what I consider routine, normal, my day job, I call it, is actually a source of motivation to many people. And I mean, I often get people giving me feedback and saying, you'll not believe just that simple interaction I had with you. It meant so much to me. It's encouraging me because I find that youth today are more and more becoming discouraged. And we almost need to find hope for a hopeless situation.
Correct, yes. Now, I'm going to go to an ad break. When we come back from the break, we're going to discuss Madam Speaker's role as Madam Speaker.